Okay, so my volume is up too, otherwise I don't have anything on it. Yeah, we're good. Okay. So last week, well, a couple weeks ago, Israel got a king, because they wanted to be like everybody else. And last week, no sooner has the king been anointed, he goes back out to his field, and while he's plowing his field, he gets word that these people that are not part of the tribes are being attacked by a guy named Nahash. And Nahash is gouging out all the right eyes of everybody. Well, this city pleads to Saul to, hey, please come help us. And he swears by God above that by noon tomorrow, you'll be delivered safely. And that happens. Saul has a wonderful battle tactic, and it works to a T. And those people bow down and give their allegiance to Saul as king. So they become part of Israel's protectorate, if you will. And so we ended last week with this, I think it's a little phrase that, and then the Philistines were there kind of thing. And, or Saul dealt with the Philistines for the rest of his reign. And here we are today. We've got Saul having to deal with the Philistines, and it's an ongoing thing with Saul, unfortunately. And David will eventually subdue them when in his reign. Yeah, spoiler alert. But let's go ahead and get started with our readings.
Can I ask a question? Remind
Yes.
me, is Jonathan Saul's son?
Jonathan is Saul's son and also the commander of the army at this point. We're going to get a new commander shortly. So not due to death, just due to need. Okay, let's put this down so we're not bothering ourselves with that thing too. Okay, so let me put this here. There we go. Okay. So 1 Samuel 14. So this answers your question there.
Yeah.
One day, Jonathan, son of Saul,
Right.
said to the young man who carried his armor, come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side. But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree that is at Migron. The troops that were with him were about 600 men. Remember, everybody fled from the other one, along with Ahijah, son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother. Remember Ichabod, son of Phinehas, son of Eli. Of course, we remember Phinehas. Well, Phinehas had two sons, Ichabod and Ahitub. And this is Phinehas's nephew, or grandnephew, Ahijah, who is now the priest of the Lord in Shiloh, carrying an ephod. Ephod just gave him priestly powers. To carry it meant that you were the head priest at the moment. Now, the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. In the pass by which Jonathan tried to go over the Philistine garrison, there was a rocky crag on one side and a rocky crag on the other. The name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other, Sinai. One crag rose on the north in front of Michmash, and the other on the south in front of Geba. A few notes. Whenever pomegranate in the Hebrew literature means knowledge or wisdom, it's what it represented. Migron, where the tree is, means fear. Migron means fear. So we get kind of a play by the writer, the compiler here. We get this play on ideas that Saul is fearing knowledge. He's fearing wisdom because he's under the pomegranate tree that's in Migron. So why there would be a pomegranate tree in Migron, I don't know, but he just grew up there. Ahijah means Yah's brother. Man, God's brother. Ahitub means brother of goodness. So already just looking at the prefixes, you can see that Ahi, A-H-I, is not Japanese for tuna. It is Hebrew for brother. So, he's the priest in charge there. Bozez means mud, Sina means bramble. So we've got we've got a pass that Jonathan is trying to get over. And that, it's craggy on both sides. And one side they call Bozez, which means mud. And the other one is Sine, which means bramble. Yeah. I wonder if that means anything. So here they all are. This is the little map here that I pulled up. We'll see it again in a minute, but this is where they're all gathering. Well, this pass is right in here. So Jonathan has snuck out to get through this pass to here. And Michmash is kind of right in the middle. So he's trying to sneak in this way to get in here. Just kind of, at the moment, we think it's just a scout, but we'll find out later it's not. This is what that area looks like. This is probably about 30 years ago, but this is what it looks like. That's that pass with Bozez on one side. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know which side's which, sorry. But mud, Bozez mud, and Sine bramble. So take your pick. And say hi to the kids. Have some goat yoga this morning. Jonathan said to the young man which held his armor, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised." It may be, it means, non-Jews. "It may be that the Lord will act for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few." His armor bearer said to him, "Do all that your mind inclines to. I am with you, as your mind is, so is mine." Then Jonathan said, "Now we will cross over those men, and we will show ourselves to them. If they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand still in our place, and we will not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come to us,' then we will go up, and the Lord has given them into our hand. That will be the sign for us." So both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines, and the Philistines said, "Look, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they had hidden themselves." So I put a little note here that said, odds don't matter to God, but I've got a few side notes here. This phrase, "as your mind is, so is mine." I'm a Star Trek fan. It sounds a lot like Spock, saying your mind to my mind, your thoughts to my thoughts. But Jonathan, we don't know what's going on with Jonathan. All of a sudden, he leaves everybody. He leaves the troops behind. He leaves his dad behind. Doesn't tell anyone where he's going. Just takes his armor bearer with him. I won't say he forces his armor bearer to pledge allegiance to him to do whatever he says, but his armor bearer, not showing very much restraint. He's all for it. Let's do it. And Jonathan, I don't know what Jonathan's thinking, but when he goes up, he's telling his armor bearer the plan. Okay, we're going to hide here. If they see us and if they see us and ask us to come forward, we will. That'll be a sign for us that God's going to give them, God's going to destroy them for us.
Does Jonathan just want to be a big hero on his own?
We don't know. But they that phrase, like father, like son. Jonathan, again, another spoiler alert, Jonathan ends up becoming David's best friend.
Yeah.
Eventually. Jonathan he was a good guy. So I don't think Jonathan was very much like his father, but he knew his father's tactics. And my guess is that he went out to scout, but he went with the idea that, I'm not doing this to betray my father. I'm doing this for the Lord. He had a heart for God. So at least we get that idea. I will say from a military standpoint that if I'm going to scout, the odd is that not to be seen. And if they do see me, they're going to ask me to step forward. That was what I was trained to do, was if I was on guard duty and somebody was there that wasn't supposed to be there,
show yourself.
Right, show yourself, proceed and step forward, give the high sign, whatever it is.
Well, how many men does Jonathan have with him?
No, he's got his armor bearer. Just
And
the
that's
two
all.
of them. Yeah, just the two of them.
Which, if you were gonna go scouting, you wouldn't want a whole lot of people.
Correct.
You'd only want a very few, so you can move around.
Correct. But man, hey, if they see us, that'll be our sign that we're gonna win. Yeah, I don't know quite about that. that. That would be my sign that I'm gonna be a POW.
Well, and it says they showed themselves. I mean, it's not like they were really hiding. They showed themselves to the garrison of Philistia.
Right.
Here I am, guys.
Right. Man, I don't know what they're thinking. The men of the garrisons hailed him and his armor bearer, saying, come up to us, we will show you something. So I wonder what? Look at this big sword. Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has given him into the hand of Israel. Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet, with his armor bearer following after him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan and his armor bearer coming after him, killed them. In that first slaughter, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed about 20 men within an area of about half a furrow long and an acre of land. About 60 feet was the furrow. Was that half furrow. There was a panic in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison and even the raiders trembled. The earth quaked and became a very great panic. This is reminiscent of something in Leviticus 26, where God promises the people of Israel that if you go into, don't worry about the odds. If you go into battle, if you meet aggressors in my name, they will flee from you, and they will that. So they will tremble in fear. So anyway, that's where that word.
And some battles recorded, they were in a state of confusion.
Uh-huh.
The enemy was.
Right.
They didn't know what to do.
And that's where this, the earthquake, I question real earthquake or a stampede quake, were they so, I just don't know. I think it was just a stampede quake. There was so much confusion, so much running around going on that, that nobody, you couldn't stand up. Every time you tried to stand up, somebody ran over you.
So one man killed 20 people.
2 men to kill 20
Jonathan and
in his
his
armor bearer.
Okay.
Saul's lookouts in Gibeah of Benjamin sat watching as the multitude was searching back and forth. So Saul's people, his lookouts, are watching all this happen. Then Saul said to the troops that were with him, call the roll and see who has gone from us. So they report to Saul, and he tells them, what is going on? Has one of our guys gone missing? Let's take let's take attendance and see who's not here. When they had called the roll, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there, and I can imagine Saul. Saul said to Ahijah, remember the priest, bring the ark of God here, for at that time the ark of God went with the Israelites. So you asked a question last week about where the ark was. Well, the last time we heard it, it was in Kiriath Jearim. So he's calling for the ark. While Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the camp of the Philistines increased more and more. And Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. That we've talked about the Urim and Thummim, 2 dye kind of things. One of them was colored one color, one the other. That was the way the priest decided or discerned what God was telling them. It was a either or question that he would ask. He'd reach in, he'd grab one, and that would tell him what God decided, kind of thing. But Saul tells the priest, withdraw your hand. He don't want to see the answer.
What do you mean? What does that mean, withdraw your hand?
Take it out of your pocket.
Take your hand out of your pocket, because he's in that bag with those dice. He's asking the question, God, do we proceed or do we stop? And Saul's afraid that when he withdraws his hand with one of those die, it's going to be stop. His son has gone and created some problems for him. So he's going to fix it. He don't care what God says. Okay. Then Saul and all the people who were with him, all 600 of them, rallied and went into the battle, and every sword was against the other, so that there was very great confusion. Now the Hebrews who previously had been with the Philistines and had gone up with them into the camp turned and joined the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. Remember when they were fighting there, all those people left, that previous battle and all that, he had 3,000 people and 2,400 of them deserted. Guess who shows up now? They're seeing the Israelites win the battle. They're seeing the Hebrews win the battle. Ooh, it's easy to jump on a bandwagon. So Likewise, when all the Israelites who had gone into hiding in the hill country of Ephraim, so that's the rest of them, heard that the Philistines were fleeing, they too followed closely after them in battle. So the Lord gave Israel the victory that day. Yeah, it's easy to jump on the bandwagon with winning. I had a friend, in fact, my best friend growing up, Stephen, he was the pastor's kid. I was the deacon's kid. We got into all kinds of trouble, but Stephen was one of those, when it came to football, he was a bandwagoner. You know, he was a Dallas Cowboy fan, you know, I forgive him for that, but he, you know, back during the Tony Dorsett days and all that, you know, they were pretty good. And then all of a sudden it was San Francisco 49ers. And all of a sudden, Stephen hated the Dallas Cowboys and loved the San Francisco 49ers. I'm like, what? I have hated the San Francisco 49ers my whole life. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Hate's a bad word. I'm sorry. I don't like their team. So the battle passed. Huh?
Did Joe Montana play there?
He did. In fact, when they were during their, you know, that 3 or 4 year stretch where they battled every year to see who was going to the Super Bowl or whatever, you had Joe Montana and you had Troy Aikman. Well, for one of those, the city of Joe Montana, one city changed their name to Joe Montana. But Troy, Texas changed their name to Troy Aikman, Texas.
I remember when that happened.
Yeah.
Just temporarily.
Right, for like the week, yeah. So the battle passed beyond Beth Haven, and the troops with Saul numbered altogether about 10,000 men. The battle spread out over the hill country of Ephraim. So they went from 600 to about 10,000, according to this. So here's that thing again. We're going to read here in a moment how all this went about. But the Philistines separated into 3 different groups. You see 1, 2, and 3. But the Israelites, you know, from here, they just press straight onward. And then these are all the other people that came back to join them. And so the Philistines kind of end up in a bad situation in that, you know, they had the upper hand when it was their 10,000 to 600, but now it's about equal. And yeah,
Was the Ark of the Covenant with the army? Where was it? He said to get it.
yeah,
So does that mean it was somewhere else or was it there?
it was probably nearby
Okay.
at this point. Okay. Now Saul committed a very rash thing today.
Very rash act.
That day, he had laid an oath on the troops, saying, "Cursed be anyone who eats food before it is evening, and I have been avenged on my enemies." Ugh, yeah, because his son was out there creating trouble for him, and he said, "Nobody will eat until we defeat all these Philistines." So none of the troops tasted food. All the troops came upon a honeycomb, and there was honey on the ground. When the troops came upon the honeycomb, the honey was dripping out. Ooh, I'm getting hungry already. But they did not put their hands to their mouths, for they feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the troops with the oath. So he extended the staff that was in his hand and dipped the tip of it in his honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. Then one of the soldiers said, "Your father strictly charged the troops with an oath, saying, 'Cursed be anyone who eats food this day.' And so the troops are faint." I will say that the problem with Saul was not that he told them not to eat, but that he cursed, because only God can curse. But the problem with this is he completely deflated their winning spirit. They had trounced the Philistines, and he completely deflated their spirits. The morale was gone. Then Jonathan said, "My father has taken the land. I can see how my eyes have brightened because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if today the troops had eaten freely of this spoil taken from their enemies. For now the slaughter among the Philistines has not been great." Yeah, that's that loss of morale there. And he's using logic. Look, just a little bit of this honey improved my physical strength, my mental strength, and morale. So.
The New American Standard has it a little bit different.
Okay.
It's good. I think it's a little more clear. Jonathan said, "My father has made trouble for the country. See how my eyes brightened when I tasted a little of this honey. How much better it would have been if the men had eaten today some of the plunder they took from their enemies. Would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater?
Yeah.
It's just a shade of
Yeah,
difference.
I love, that's why I prefer people to use different translations, so they can stop me on these things, so. I like the NRSV, that's a lesson in itself, so. We might do that sometime, tell about all the different translations. But thank you, Jane. After they had struck down the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon, the troops were very faint. So the troops flew upon the spoil and took sheep and oxen and calves and slaughtered them on the ground, and troops ate them with the blood. So they're gone nuts. They are so destitute with food that they're right. They're going crazy.
You should have let them eat the honey.
Yeah.
Right. Then it was reported to Saul, look, the troops are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood. Uh-oh. And he said, you have dealt treacherously. Roll a large stone before me here. Now, why would he want a large stone? What were they
For an
using?
altar?
For an altar, yeah. Saul said, disperse yourselves among the troops and say to them, let all bring their oxen or their sheep there and slaughter them here and eat, and do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood. So he's building an altar, a place where they can,
Because there was a
Properly.
ritual way to slaughter, right?
Correct. So all of the troops brought their oxen with them that night and slaughtered them there. And Saul, man, they must be, I've walked into restaurants and said, man, I'm so hungry, I could eat a side of beef. I don't know if I could eat all of that. Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar that he built to the Lord. Aijalon means strength. So it's funny that, irony that they go from Michmash, this battle, to Aijalon. They go to their strength and they're faint. They're famished, they sin. You're not supposed to eat the blood of the animal in Hebrew times. So Saul seeks to right the wrong, but does he? Then
Does he
Saul,
try or does he do it?
well, it said he was with the Lord, so his mind was in the right place. However, then Saul said, let us go down from the Philistines by night and despoil them until the morning light. Let us not leave one of them. They said, do whatever seems good to you. The priest said, let us draw near to God here. So Saul inquired of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. God didn't answer that day through the priest. Saul said, come here, all you leaders of the people, let us find out how this sin has arisen today. Whereas the Lord lives who saves Israel, even if it is my own son Jonathan, he shall surely die. Uh-oh. But there was no one among all the people who answered him. He said to all Israel, you shall be on one side, and I and my son Jonathan will be on the other side. The people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. Now, so his impatience is leading to further sin here. God gives three answers. We talked about this in men's group yesterday. God gives three answers when we pray or when we ask God for something. Yes, no, and wait. We don't like wait. Of course, we don't like no either, but at least no is a definitive thing. We don't like wait. But you see that he has divided all the other people on one side and then him and Jonathan on the other. That Urim and Thummim. Oh, that's hard to say.
Say that 3 times fast.
Right. That's why he's dividing, because there's only two die. There's only two stones or whatever. So he is going to inquire, and each time he inquires, it's going to be either this or that. And so as the priest draws in, pulls it out, we're going to see what happens. So. Then Saul said, O Lord God, all of Israel, you have not answered your servant today, or why have you not answered your servant today? If this guilt is in me or in my son Jonathan, O Lord God of Israel, give Urim. That's one die. But if this guilt is in your people Israel, give Thummim. And Jonathan and Saul were indicated by the lot. So the priest draws out this die, and it is the Urim. It's on Jonathan and Saul. Jonathan and Saul were indicated by the lot, but the people were cleared. Then Saul said, cast a lot between me and my son Jonathan. And Jonathan was taken. So then the priest puts the two die back in his little pouch, and he divides, okay, so it's one of us two. Which one is it? And it goes to, the priest draws it out, and it's the one for Jonathan. So
And when you say Jonathan was taken, what does that mean?
Means the lot was taken, the die for Jonathan was drawn out.
Okay.
He was the one chosen by God, through the discernment and the die. How would you like to do that? Okay, we're gonna take a vote,
It wasn't really taken.
roll the die.
Does that mean he was?
Guilty?
Yeah, it means that God is saying Jonathan is the one
You're
guilty.
responsible.
That's a lot like picking an 8-ball with.
Yes,
And
with only
and
two
that's
choices.
supposed to be
though.
God's decision.
That's what they felt, yes. And this continued on for a long time.
How much of Satan was in that?
Well, none, because it was the way they had
Communicated.
covenanted with God. They truly believed, and thus far it had worked for them. So do not test the Lord your God. So then Saul said to Jonathan, "Tell me what you've done." Jonathan told him, "I tasted a little honey with the tip of the staff that was in my hand. Here I am, I will die." So Jonathan takes responsibility for doing that. Saul said, "God, do so to me and more also. You shall surely die, Jonathan." So Saul, he's got to save face. He's got to be right. He already made this declaration. He can't go back on it. So he feels that his pride is above family, or above his sin. Then the people said to Saul, the people said to Saul, "Shall Jonathan die, who has accomplished this great victory in Israel? Your son Jonathan is the one that led us into victory today." Oh, yeah, that doesn't sit well either. "As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God today." So the people ransomed Jonathan, and he did not die. They paid the king off to save Jonathan. Then Saul withdrew from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. So, okay, we win, you guys lose, go home. So Saul, we're seeing Saul's character here. He just has to be right. He cannot swallow his pride at all.
Well, was it okay for the people to ransom Jonathan? Was it okay?
Well, we assume it is. They did it. So I don't know. Without doing further research, I don't know what the practice was for that, but obviously it worked.
Well, God doesn't strike him dead. So.
Correct. But he doesn't strike Saul dead either. So when Saul had taken the kingship over Israel, he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, against the Ammonites, against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he routed them. He did valiantly and struck down the Amalekites and rescued Israel out of the hands of those who plundered them. Moab, means desirable land. And if y'all remember where Moab came from, Moab was the oldest son of Lot. Y'all remember Lot?
Yeah.
Okay. Ammon means secret. Ammon was the youngest son of Lot. Edom comes from the word red, or means red, but Edom was what Esau's name was changed to. Jacob was changed to Israel. Esau was changed to Edom. So, okay. Esau, by the way, means hairy. So, Zobah means warring. So if we look at some of these names, we've got, he fought against all his enemies on every side, the desirable ones, the secret ones, the red ones. Maybe that's their skin color. I don't know. The warring ones, the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. We haven't talked about them. Their name means those who wallow. So the pigs, and against the pigs, wherever he turned, he routed them. And he did valiantly, and he struck down Amalekites. Amalekites mean valley dweller. Amalek was Esau's grandson, and they were persistent enemies of Israel. So.
Isn't that interesting to think that all those people they were fighting were actually their relatives?
Yep, blood relatives,
Yeah.
just distant blood relatives,
Yeah.
kind of like,
Well, when Esau lost his birthright, he stayed mad.
That's funny.
Now, the sons of Saul were Jonathan, I can't see that second word, Ishvi and Malchishua, and the names of his two daughters were these. The names of the firstborn was Merab, and the name of the younger Michael. Ooh, I love that name. The name of Saul's wife was Ahinoam, daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the commander of his army was Abner, son of Ner. So now we've got a new commander of the army, Abner, Saul's uncle. Ner was Saul's uncle. So Abner is the son. It's funny because Abner means son of Ner, and he was the son of Ner. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner, the father of Abner, was the son of Belial. So Saul and, or I'm sorry, Kish and Ner are, Kish is his dad, Ner is his uncle, but they have two different mothers. They have the same father, but they have two different mothers. So, sorry. Jonathan means God is given. Ishvi means he resembles me. Malchishua means king of help. Merab means God will increase. I love those words. Michael, who resembles God. Like I said, I love that word. Ahinoam means pleasant. Ahimaaz means counselor. Abner means son of light or son of Ner. Of course, Ner means light. And then the final verse here in 14, there was hard fighting against the Philistines all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong or valiant warrior, he took him into his service. And I take that to mean that he kept the best for himself. He conscripted every person that he ever saw that had any value to his army.
To be his, sort of his personal guard.
Which is, which fits the description that Samuel gave them when they said, this is what a king's going to do. He's going to take, he's going to take, he's going to take, he's going to take the people, he's going to take the land, he's going to take the crops.
So he replaced Jonathan, who was in charge of his army, right?
Well, if your general struck out on his own with just his armor bearer and with no battle plan or anything like that and caused all this havoc, and he happened to be your son, I would have probably done it too. Yeah. Okay, Jonathan, that's it. You're fired. I'm getting somebody else. Now, Jonathan would still remain in the army service. He would still be a leader, he just wouldn't be the general.
So when this says Saul took mighty or brave men into his service, is that the people he defeated as well?
Possibly.
Because it comes right after that, it says, all the days of Saul, there was bitter war with the Philistines. This says, and whenever he saw a mighty or brave man, he took him into his service. So
It's very possible. We know that David did. David hired mercenaries. That's where Uriel, you remember Uriel, the husband of Bathsheba, he was a hired mercenary. He was hired. Okay, so next week, Saul shows mercy. Saul experiences rejection, and Saul is relieved in more ways than one. Thank y'all. Any questions or anything this morning?
Texas were always fighting, weren't they?
Well, under Saul, yes, because they anointed, they chose a warrior leader. And what's, another ironic thing is, what were the people of Israel expecting? Eventually, they were expecting the Messiah, a warrior leader. Well, they got one to start with, and that wasn't what they needed. They wanted one to end with, and that's not what they needed. Anyway, thank y'all and have a good week. And next week we'll be in chapter 15. We only got one chapter.